Oh, hi. Oh, we started with a laugh. That was great. It was like the cold open of SNL. That was exciting. Hey, it's me, Brittlestar, and you're listening to and or watching Podcast is Broken, a brand new series that doesn't feature just me, of course. So you guys can introduce yourselves, and so if you don't know what I do, I make videos on the internet, and that's the wrong answer when asked by a U.S. Customs Guard what you do for a living. Unless they happen to have seen one of your videos, then it's the right answer. So that's what I do, and occasionally sort of poke my head into news and current events and all that kind of stuff, and try to make sense of the world. And that's what I'm hoping to do with this little series as well. Who's going to take it from here? Who's next?
Oh, I can jump in. My name is Steve Boots. I am a full-time teacher in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I basically work full-time on the side as a content creator. I record on TikTok, I stream on Twitch and YouTube and all manner of things. But the big thing for me is just I love talking about current events. I think it's important to talk about politics, but also just like ever since I was a kid arguing with my brother while watching The Daily Show, it's just what I love. So I'm here to argue with you two about politics. Bring it on.
Amazing. Last but certainly not least.
My name is Lisa. I go by Lisa B0923 on TikTok. I talk a lot about politics, specifically in Alberta, but I like to spread my wings every once in a while. I think it's important that we bring things to the people. I think a lot of people are overwhelmed a lot of the time with what's going on, and I think it's important that we break it down for them so that they can absorb it like we do. And I will fight the two of you. I don't care.
That's good. I was concerned you're going to get too earnest. I was really worried. I was like, oh God, she's gone all earnest. That's no good.
No.
It'll pass quickly.
Yeah.
Who's going to listen to that? So here's a question for you guys that I thought we should start with is, so this Podcast is Broken series is the aim is to talk about news events happening in and of and to Canada. Because I think there's a kind of a need for that, for somewhere people to go to digest. And certainly with you guys, that's what I do with your content is I'll learn so much about what's happening in areas that I might not have seen in the paper or seen online or whatever. And I get it feels like you guys really chew it up and spit it out. And it's also entertaining and comedic and all that kind of stuff. I just take really broad stroke stuff and skip the details. It's much eeasier.
Like any politician.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, yeah, I think, but one of the things that's interesting to me is deciding like how much news is too much news, because there's a little bit of like social media already has like a FOMO aspect to it. Like your fear of missing out if you don't keep scrolling, and TikTok's really good at that. Instagram's really good at that. And I think with news, I think for certainly the past sort of 8 to 10 years for me, it's like whenever something's happened around the world, I want to know what happened like right now. I want updates right. Why is there no updates right now? And then I think to myself, well, that can't be healthy. You know what I mean? So how do you know how much news is too much news?
When your eyes start to cross, it's time to put it down.
So, yeah, there's something to be said for me. I know I'm news overdosed when I start to feel a little despondent. Like it can get overwhelming. There's no doubt. And I think Lisa and I both come from a place of like, we both, I know, started as sort of avid consumers of news, and then just started taking our love of yammering about the news and not having friends who wanted to listen to us yammer about the news. Mine do not talk
on
politics
strangers
at all. And inflicted on strangers.
You don't talk politics to friends at all?
Not at all.
Really?
No. Honestly, like if you think about it, like most people in their day-to-day life don't want to get into like the serious structural underpinnings of the problems our society faces.
Sure.
They want to say like, hey, you hear that, I live in Saskatchewan. So it's like, you hear that so-and-so's cows got out on the weekend, or like,
the important
front
stuff.
Page,
The
front page news can be a little tame sometimes. There's stuff, but I think it comes from a place of just like, we enjoy consuming the news and like talking about it. But when you start to feel despondent, when it starts to feel really like this is just, there's too many problems. That's when I take a step back.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I find is you got to be able to keep laughing at it. There's silly stuff always. And that helps me manage it. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I know you find a way somehow.
Well, I mean, there's the absurdity of it. I think that's what struck me in the past, because I've never been into politics at all in my life. I always thought it was silly and horrible and gross and slimy and sleazy, and it is all of those things. However, the line of what was defining politics to me kind of grew quite a bit, and it was kind of that realization, like, oh wait, this is going to impact me. It's not just some weird tax policy that I'll never feel. It's now, battery exhausted. It was a really good part, too.
I mean, I've been there, camera.
Oh my, look at that.
It's Monday. It's Monday. I like the colors. The colors are good.
I do like the colors as well.
Yeah, it's a nice touch.
Maybe we'll just go without you guys talk more, and then I'll just fix the camera.
Okay.
You just yeah.
We'll visually describe Stuart.
For the people listening, nothing has happened to them at all. They're like, why is he panicked?
We got rid of him. We got rid of him.
If you're listening to this podcast, business as usual.
Right?
Don't worry.
This is it.
Exactly. Everything's fine.
It's in the title. The podcast is broken. It's just
That's right. Exactly. I'm living up to it.
There you
it's
go.
Perfect. And I am a technical genius. Lisa,
yeah. Like, I mean, I think Steve has it, is that when I get to a place where I don't think I can make it funny or bring some levity to it so that people would understand it, then I have to take a break. And I sometimes I say, I'll take weekends off, but it depends on what's happening in the world, right? But I think it's important to take a break every once in a while, because I mean, I'm sure I can speak for Steve. Like, we put a lot into this, right? We research things. We want to make sure.
You really do.
Yeah.
Both of you do. Yeah.
We want to make sure that we're getting out the right stuff, because there's so much wrong that's being put out that sometimes you just have to take a break. But I feel like that is a large majority of the population that feel that everything is too sad or too depressing or too insurmountable. So my goal is to make it so that they get it. They understand it without having to do all the hard work. So,
I think you're pointing to something really important, though, is that we are trying to focus on sort of the empathetic side of it and finding those things for people to connect to in the stories. And I think that makes it more manageable in my mind, is because it doesn't feel as bleak, because you're always looking for sort of the humanity in things. You're looking for the path forward, and you're trying to help offer that to people. Because I think the people who feel sad and despondent about the news are the ones who genuinely care.
Yeah. And they're the ones they can't, right? Like, I mean, being an empathetic person, it's hard sometimes, right? So the best compliments I get is, thanks for breaking that down. Thanks for making me understand it, right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the thing for me as well. Is, I mean, and a much, like you said, you guys are so researched in what you do, and it's evident that there's so much entertainment and comedy in what you're doing. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not being misled. I feel like I'm getting the actual information from you about the story. Whereas for me, it's much more broad stroke. It's much more like, I'll look at a situation and go, okay, am I understanding this correctly? And then I'll confirm that I'm understanding it correctly. And then I'll just make fun of the broadest possible aspect of that without getting into the weeds, basically, for me. Because I know I'll probably try to, in the effort of making a joke, I'd end up, trying to screw it up, or end up screwing it up, or saying the wrong thing, or putting out some more misinformation or something. But I mean, there's this aspect to me of having too much news, for me, at least during the pandemic, was really evident, where I felt totally helpless. Like, I felt like incredibly helpless. And I wanted to consume more, and I wanted to be keeping up to date, and I wanted to keep, myself informed. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know if I can take much more of this, because I can affect so little of what's happening in the world. And it wasn't just the pandemic. It was like things that were happening, with wars and poverty and inequality and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, it feels like I'm consuming this, and I'm getting all uptight about it and anxious and high blood pressure, but I can't do anything about it at all. Like, do you guys ever get that way where you're thinking, oh my God, like, this place is going to hell?
Yeah, but I'm stubborn, so like, you just have to keep going. Right. I think, I think most of us came to the platforms that we came to during the pandemic, right? And part of it was like, oh, I got a lot of spare time. But part of it was like, where do you get it out, right? And so I think that's, for me at least, was, okay, well, I'm in Alberta, so, you know, COVID central. That's how things started to happen. And, you know, I kind of feel a bit of a responsibility to get the messaging out to people. Because I know it can be hard, you know, and if you don't want to watch the news or you don't want to read the newspaper or whatever mainstream media, it's important for people to know what's going on, even if it's just a little bit, right?
I think you pointed to something that's really important there, is that, like, when you start talking about news on or current events or social issues on something like TikTok or social media, once you start to have a platform, I think, you know, anybody who's using that platform well and doing something worth doing immediately feels the weight of responsibility that comes with their platform, like to get it right, to be upfront, to be direct, to be like, to like, people give you a lot of trust, right? Like whenever somebody says you're my only news source, my immediate reaction is, thank you, that's very kind. Please don't make that the case.
What a terrible mistake.
Right? Like that's kind of you to say. I know you think that's a compliment, but
yeah.
But like, you feel a real weight of responsibility. But the other thing you feel and become acutely aware of is like the bad actors who twist up these stories to serve their own ends. And we know who they are out there. We'll Voldemort them. We won't name any, but
for now,
we for now. Although I'll tell one story in a second, but it's so obvious how quickly those platforms could be turned to problematic uses, right? And so I think the good news is that somebody who's able to build that kind of platform, especially as a progressive or a leftist, is probably doing it from some sort of set of values, because nobody's doing it to get rich, right? So generally, I think I know, I was surprised too.
See, what you guys got to do is dumb it down and go for the goal, like I try to. Yeah.
So the one story that I do want to share, though, I don't know if you want to name them or not, but a certain right-leaning news outlet who claims to be a charity, in a YouTube video, called me out as an unhinged leftist, and it was hilarious because I was like,
funny,
very calmly explaining why people should have housing.
Right.
There's this like, unhinged, listen to this lunatic.
One of my favorites is, we'll say, a former hockey player who enjoys dooting called me a communist once. I was like, you don't know what that means, but okay, I'll take it.
It's been interesting for me because, I mean, you been doing this and making content for like over 10 years as like a full-time gig, it's gone from like really goofy entertainment stuff to, when Trump was elected in the States and that whole lead up and stuff, and it was evident to me, it was like, this is not a good thing. And you would get people chirping you, basically, and but they would say all sorts of things, and it's just like they're just kind of parroting back. And it always felt like they were just trying to save face more than anything else. You know, it's like sort of yelling at something as you're running away from a fight, basically.
So, yeah, it's like when you watch the news these days, it becomes increasingly a battle of sound bites. But the other thing that happens is, the more you look for it, the more you realize that almost everything that you read, or a huge portion of what you read, is either a reaction to things or a reaction to a reaction to things.
Yeah.
And so there's so much noise and nonsense. And so I think a lot gets lost in that, for sure.
I think sometimes
I'm going to try to change my... Oh, sorry, go ahead. You can talk while I'm going to change the battery in this camera if I can.
I think I know there's the FOMO about, I'm going to miss out and I need to know this now. But I think there's something to be said for just taking a breath, because things change so quickly in real time, right? And I usually, like, my versions of the stories or my recounts of the stories are usually 1 or 2 days behind. I mean, that's for me, just because I can't keep up sometimes, right? Like, I mean, I got a job. Daddy bucks aren't paying very much these days, but so yeah, so like I think it's important, and because I take that responsibility of making sure that I'm breaking it down correctly, I'm getting all the information. But I would rather, like for me, I would rather take a few important stories and nail them. And I know, Steve, you have like, I don't know how you do it in a day. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. I couldn't do what you do. I don't want to do what you do, but no, I couldn't do it. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there, and I think we just have to, you take the things that you think are important to the audience, but more importantly, you take the things that you think are important to you and you break it down, and that resonates, I think.
I think you're 100% right. And I think there's sort of two things to highlight here. One is, I think it's always important to remember, and I think we're both very aware of this, is like that what we do is something different than journalism and sort of alongside journalism. We're not quite commentary, we're not quite journalism. We're almost like I haven't come up with the right word for it.
We need to come up with the word, right? We need to figure that out.
Right, because our work relies on original journalism. I think that's always really important to highlight and really important to remember. Like, I don't know if you get this, but like I get approached by people who want me to cover a story that affects them. And it's like, I appreciate that you think I can, but I don't have the skills or the resources. I'm not a journalist. I'm a guy on this phone.
I had to stop looking at messages because people would ask this, and I would love to help, but like, I can't do everything. Right. And so, it's the same thing. I know you get it, Steve, people saying, you guys should go into politics. You should run for this. And it's like, absolutely not. I couldn't do this if I like held a position, right?
Well, and that's it. Like I whenever somebody says you should be a politician to somebody who isn't a politician, but breaks down politics or discusses it or does commentary, the thing you always have to remember is you need people on the outside who are speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I very much view myself as like almost like a like a court jester, like the guy who has no skin in the game, who will just I as soon as somebody starts like living in Ottawa and doing journalism, they now personally know the people they're talking about.
It gets harder.
They have that little coloring that goes, oh, he's a good guy though. Right. And so I'm very guarded against that. I worry about that because it's really important to look at this stuff very analytically and very honestly, and to have people who are doing that. And the more you start to get like intermixed, the more complicated it gets, right?
Well, I think that's also sorry, I didn't interrupt.
No, go ahead, please.
I think that's also one of those things where you have to realize that when it comes to politics specifically, that politics is its own game. It's its own beast. It's its own dance. It's like this, like, why don't they just do this? It's like, well, of course they would just do that if they could just do that.
It's like, oh, is that all that has to happen?
Oh, is that it? Just decide?
The skill set to be a good advocate versus the skill set to be an effective political operator are completely different.
Absolutely. Polar opposites. And I mean, it's super easy for, I think, all three of us to kind of sit on the sidelines of the news and read it and go, this is the issue. I think it's important, certainly what you guys do and what I aim to do a little bit is to sort of put things into perspective so that, in my case, people can watch the content I'm creating and go, well, he's an idiot, I'm an idiot, and we're both on the same page. Okay, so like I got that right. Okay, good. Compared to like, you know, actually being in the middle of the dance of saying like, if I want to get this done, that means this person's going to, I've seen The West Wing. I know how it works. I know how it works. You've got to do this to get this and this to get this. And
that's it. The horse trading and stuff. I couldn't do it.
No.
You need to the problem that I have, and it is a problem in the context of like the idea of being a politician. And I feel like you have this too, Lisa, is I have the inability to look at somebody and tell them something I don't sincerely believe.
100%.
Can't do it.
And I have no problems with that at all.
But you get paid the big bucks. As a politician,
sometimes you need to be able to do that.
You seen my camera?
Right? Sometimes you've got to play the game. You got to say the right thing to get the person to agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's interesting. You know, we had this isn't like a humble brag or an attempted humble brag or anything, but when we were in Ottawa, we got invited to go to the PMO's office. We got like a message from the chief of staff, and she was like, "Come in. And would you be interested in coming in?" I was like, "Sure." So Shannon and I went. We met, and Prime Minister Trudeau was very gracious. He's like, he knows what he's doing. He's like, the guy is like, he's very good at his job. Whether you like him or not, it's like, this is a guy who's good. He's charming, he's congenial, and all that kind of stuff. But I went in there thinking to myself, I don't know if he's the right guy for the job. He's going through a hard time and personally and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's time to like step down and let somebody else take up this battle. And after 20 minutes of talking to the guy and then asking him point blank, I was like, are you ready for this like next chapter that's about to happen? And he looked at me and he kind of looked down at the ground. He looked back up and he went, absolutely. And I went, I think I believe you. But I mean, it wasn't a case of him just like, I'm going to do the right thing and I'm amazing. It was like, I know I'm going to have to do 5 steps back and 8 steps forward and then 2 steps back. And he's going to do all those dance moves. And that's a skill set on its own, entirely on its own.
But there's another thing in there too. And like, you know, call it arrogance, call it swagger, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
In order to sincerely believe that you have what it takes to run a country, you need to be unbelievably sure of yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that manifests itself in different ways.
The man can declare war.
Okay.
Like who wakes up in the morning and is like, yeah, I think I got
Forget the running the country. That's fine. People have done that before. But you have to run the country with people flying flags with your name on it. Like, it's a whole different entity.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Like, have you been, Stuart, to Western Canada since all this Trudeau madness has lost its marbles?
Yeah, we took the book tour out to Calgary and stuff. And
in Regina, it's on like trucks on trucks. Yeah. It's in like daycare parking lots. Like, literally, you cannot drive 5 minutes without seeing one in Regina.
But I mean, I think that whole thing was, I mean, I, you know, not to give him too much sympathy, but I think, you know, when Trudeau stepped in, he was like a ray of sunshine, sunny days, sunny ways. And then he sort of went into Trump time, and then we went into the pandemic. And I'm like, man, that is a rough roll of the dice.
Bad timing.
Doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah, he got a tough draw. There's no doubt.
Exactly. It is rough compared to like
he's been primed for this since he was like a baby, and that's the time that he picks. Yeah, I know.
His dad bounced him and said, "What's going to be your FLQ?" And he's just joking. That'll never happen again. Nothing like that'll happen. But
now I'm just picturing him flipping off the West from a train and going, "This won't have any long-term consequences. This will end."
He's like,
with
"But
me.
my daddy never had flags with his name on it."
Exactly. Right. People loved him. It was like Beatlemania. But I think, you know, it's he, not to give him too much sympathy, but at the same time, it would be so hard to stay focused and to stay motivated. You would need to have that shield of ego. You would need to think you are like the you know, the big man, and if you can do it, I mean, that's great. And I think I was going to say it manifests itself in different ways. But I was going to say about the F Trudeau flags and all that kind of stuff. I think that all, you know, as we saw it coming out of Trump, coming out of the pandemic, and I wrote about this last week, saying about how my theory is that this is the first time in history for a lot of people, meaning a lot in personal history of these people, that the news has affected them. And I don't think the news has ever affected their lives before, ever, because you look at the swath of people that are doing it. There's not a lot of immigrants doing it. You know, there's not a lot of non-white people doing it. And these are all people who are driving nice trucks and stuff. And it's like, what? How could you mean the things in the newspaper affect me too? And I think that was so terrifying. And to give them credit, it must have been absolutely terrifying. And I think they see people like Trudeau and they see, you know, the vaccine and all that kind of stuff. And they think this is what's happening. Obviously, because this has never happened before. The news has never affected me before, and it suddenly affects me. That means someone's out to get me, and it's probably that guy that's out to get me.
So I think the second layer to that, too, during that time period is that awareness of news became equated to safety.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Absolutely.
It felt like the more you knew about COVID, the better you could handle it. If you just disinfected your groceries, just so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. If you watch
Sure.
that 15-minute special on how to properly put a mask on, and then like a year later you're rooting around for it on the floor of your car.
Yeah.
But like I think people consuming news became a bit of a security blanket for one group of people.
Sure.
And another group of people took that stress in the absolute wildly opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, but in both cases, it's a very natural stress reaction. And I think that's part of the underlying issue is that super ever-present 24-hour news cycle pressure to make news scary. So people keep watching.
Yeah.
And so
sure.
people get stressed, and then those stress reactions prompt fight or flight. Some people, lock themselves in their houses out of necessity in some cases, and in other cases, just because it was scary times, man.
Yeah, I think.
And some people went the other way and got angry and were
But do you remember
protesting
like the month or month and a half when everybody was on the same page? Right?
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
everybody went for walks.
Yeah,
Everybody got
like
dogs,
March and
right?
April.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, "Oh, March break's never going to end. This is great. The
And
weather
then
just
it
keeps getting better."
It was like when Pokemon Go came out, but even
yeah. I know.
Well, exactly. But I think you're exactly right. I think that news became a comfort for a lot of people. Like certainly myself, it became a comfort. It's like, yes, feed me information. I want the prime minister to stand out in his little cottage steps. I want him to tell me what to do.
And
I want Dr. Tam to come out and talk to me and me to think to myself, oh God, I got to make a video because that is really dry. And I want that. But some people heard like those threats essentially distilled down to do this or you're going to die or kill your family. And I heard that as, oh, I better do that. I don't want to kill myself or my family. And other people heard that as just a threat. Do this or you're going to die. Your family's going to die. There's no choice. You know what I mean?
And so I permit me to be a teacher nerd for a second here.
So
this is a principle that, but this is a principle that comes up in classroom management. If you are like a rules-based, authority-based classroom management, kids aren't going to follow it.
No.
Because rules are dares to be defied, right?
Sure.
And so the way that you build an actual functional classroom is through community value building, by building a sense of collective responsibility to one another, instead of building it over a basis of threat. And so I think that's where things went a little bit wrong, is that the ideal behind it was positive, but the way that it came out was it was communicated to a lot of people in ways that felt like oppressive bans rather than community protection.
For sure.
I don't know how you would do it better. Like I don't sit
No, I
here
don't
to
know
pretend
either.
to
That's
have
the
an
thing.
answer.
Because it was life and death.
But here's the thing.
You know
like,
what I mean? Yeah.
The West hated Trudeau before COVID. Like that's just a historic generational voting thing. So having a time machine, wouldn't it be interesting to see what the difference would have been had there been a conservative government in place? Because I guarantee you, if we're talking dictatorship, a conservative government certainly would have imposed that authoritarianism, right?
They would have had no choice but to do functionally the same basic things.
Because everything, like the economy was under attack. I think that was the big thing to me like, what can we do to get out of this? Because the economy will not survive much longer. So let's figure this out.
But like, if you want to pretend that the conservatives wouldn't have put in COVID restrictions, the Donald Trump Republicans put in COVID restrictions.
Yeah, which I love.
It was going to happen. There was no way around it.
I love the people that are in Canada and Canadians complaining about, this, like, I got to get shots before I can cross the border. It's like, guys, not our rule.
That's a whole lot of, we've had these battles of.
Also can't take a pooch down there. Good luck.
Or a Kinder Egg. A Kinder Egg. Don't do that.
Yeah. A Kinder Egg.
Yeah, be careful with the Kinder Egg. That's nature's deadliest killer.
Exactly.
But it's just, look, we've never been through that. We've had historic world events in our generations where for a moment in time, we were all kind of glued at the same time. But for something to go on 6 months, a year, really showed the different breakdowns of groups And when we're talking about news and we're talking about how it's impactful, and it became a me, not a we issue. Like there's so much that happened on a sociological, anthropological level.
Oh my God.
It brought out the best and the worst in people. And I think forget even COVID, we're going to be reeling from that for the next while. Yeah.
I know. I always get told by people like, it's enough about the pandemic. Stop talking about the pandemic. And it's like, guys, we need to talk about this because it was pretty dark. It was pretty hard. It was the first time in a lot of our lives where what I did affected my neighbors. It's like we have neighbors on one side who they get blazed all the time. They're the nicest people in the world. They have like rough looking sorts hanging out, but they're just lovely and they're nice people. I don't care what they do. It's fine because it doesn't affect me. And as long as they're nice to me, that's great. But then suddenly during the pandemic, it was like, holy fuck, wear a mask because you're going to kill me. You know what I mean? And I need to work. And it's just that because you said there's times in our past in our lives where we had these moments where we all kind of gathered together to sort of experience these moments. For whatever reason, the only thing I can think of was it's not funny. The shuttle Challenger exploding, which was, I don't know why it's a joke. It's not a joke at all. But just that idea of why watching that, everyone kind of remembers if they were around watching that happen, but it didn't matter to us. Like it had no impact on the rest of my day compared to this. It was far away and it had no impact on me whatsoever. So not a problem. Not a problem. I want to just change gears slightly as we move on here. But keeping kind of in the same thing, and feel free to say this is a stupid topic and let's not talk about it because again, you guys know more than I do. I just want to touch briefly on that whole idea of stoking fear and anger and rage baiting and all that kind of stuff that happens that we saw in the States in 2016 moving forward, and it was really effective, really, really effective, and it gave birth to like a real, as you know, Steve, you said a real soundbite kind of world of even more than had been previously. But where we get all these sort of slogans. How do we feel about these slogans, like the conservative slogans, the axe the tax and arrives?
Oh, they're always three
axe
words. Bring it home.
Bring it home. Take back Canada. Where? I mean, I from a marketing perspective, I think they're genius. I think that they work really, really well. It goes back to the old marketing thing of think mink. It's just that. It's easy to remember and it sticks in your head, like axe the tax and stuff. Now, I do feel whoever it was, one of the liberals had said, started trying to get people to catch on to axe the facts.
That's cute.
I
didn't hear that one.
I mean, that's pretty good. And they should have jumped on that a bit more.
Is that? Okay, so I've heard that, but it's only like it's super niche and it's about medical records.
Yeah.
It's about, in Alberta, there were people tweeting the other day, axe the fax, because there was like FAX. Because
the fax machine.
Because people still have to fax medical records because we live in 1970. Oh, man. So I think the fear mongering is so this is a thing that I think we're forever fighting against, right? Is fear mongering is crazy easy. Like, hostile, angry content on TikTok. Like we have such an instant feedback system, right? Like you post a video, you get to see exactly how it's doing.
Yeah.
And you can direct one-to-one compare it to a jillion others instantly. And if you make something that is hostile or angry or whatever, views through the roof.
Yeah.
If you make, like, I refuse to make stuff calling out creators because I don't think it's worthwhile. I go after the powerful, not people on their phones.
Love it.
If you do,
love it. People love the drama.
Yeah.
And so people love drama, people love conflict, and it's tough because what happens is all of that stuff, it's this veneer that hides the fact that there's just no underpinnings at all. And so I think that's where folks like Lisa and I try to come at things is from a place of substance.
Yeah.
Because that's the only defense against that crap. Is to say, like, I'm talking about real things here, and he's just yammering axe the tax. Like, then what? Right? Like, and so I think that's, and it's tough because it's very much sort of like, you got to tell the truth 10 times to get rid of the lie that was told once.
Sure.
And it's super draining and frustrating, and it feels like you're peeing in the ocean. but you can't stop. I don't know why you can't stop. You can't stop.
Because, I mean, this is the thing. Like, so with this Trumpism that's made its way up and these slogans and this, these rallies, like, I mean, it's just a page out of what happened in the US, right? But in Canada, we're always like a few years behind. So now it's come this way. And that's
yeah, I think it's like it's like acid wash jeans. They're popular in the States first.
We just got whatever TV show was popular in Michigan at the time.
So sorry. But it works. It worked in the States. It's working here optically. I don't know if it's actually going to work, come poll time. But there's a subset of Canadians who want somebody to recognize them and fight for them. And, the Conservative leader has sort of grasped that. Now, it's zero substance. There's nothing behind it except these, buzzwords that he likes to throw out, but people will cheer and bring signs that are positive and say, wah, wah, wah. I know it's garbage, right? Anyone who knows anything about politics knows it's garbage, but Joe Canadian doesn't really know. They just know that, they have to show up in October and do a vote at some point, right? Like that's all they know. So I can't stop breaking it down until people understand the impact that this could have. And that's the concern, I think, for a lot of us is regardless whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, this is all about impact in the future. It's not just about today. So that's why
But there's another layer too, which I think is there's a huge shortage in the media environment everywhere, but in Canada and North America, there's a shortage of progressive voices and left-leaning voices. Like there's people who get like yelled at for being a leftist that are definitely not a leftist. But what happens, the problem that you run into is that the interests of a lot of these right-leaning, talking heads and politicians is that their interests and moneyed interests align. And so there's money flowing to them. And on the progressive side, there just isn't. And so the only way that you're going to get people pushing back en masse at the scale that you need against those narratives is organically. You need people to just pick up their phone and start telling their ideas and calling people out. Not one another, politicians and the powerful and the wealthy and the billionaires, they deserve it. They're doing fine.
They have people for that. That's fine.
Exactly.
They don't watch your video. They pay someone else to.
Exactly. But it's, I find it, do you think I often hope that there's like potential that if you can convince people or tell them, or explain to them somehow, this is kind of what I try to do. You're being fooled. You're being suckered. You're being taken for a sucker. You're getting the wool pulled over your eyes. And that's kind of what I try to do with the videos when I'm making the videos and making fun of something. I always think I'm going to be much more effective, at least for me, if I can, and this doesn't speak to your content because you actually know what you're talking about, whereas I only kind of do. I don't have time to read the news. But I'll try to create something that'll have the angle of like, yeah, that is stupid. That is really dumb, isn't it? To get them to kind of buy into that idea. Like I did a video making fun of that. People said it was a green screened Poilievre rally. But he wasn't green screened. He's just messianically lit. That was it. And I don't mean that
really hard with the rim light for him.
Yeah, no. I don't mean that in a cool way. That's messianically lit, not like a church youth group way. I mean like in a lighting way. And it was still funny. And I thought to myself, there's so many things that he's saying in this clip that if I was in the audience, I'd be like, screw you, man. I'm not the unwashed. Get out of here. What are you talking about? And it needed to be made fun of. And I started to feel like I hope that there's this idea that if you convince people or explain to them, listen, this is what he's actually saying. Because it sounds great in a flurry. But when it's stopped and chopped and pulled apart into pieces, you go, oh, this is just garbage. This is just nonsense. And I've really been noticing that in this past week about how the journalism's kind of stepped up, and Canadian media has stepped up a little bit, specifically with Poilievre, where he'll say something, they'll be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Or when he'll ask them a question, they're like, that's not how it works,
when he tries
man.
to interview the interviewers, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because like there are these very rote, practiced games that these politicians play, right? Like the answer the question you wish you'd been asked. Sure. Or, you know, try to, you know, pivot to the thing you actually want to talk, like all this stuff. And so to see Poilievre, he's been playing this very fast, talky patter sort of game that you were pointing at, where like, you know, he says just a lot of things fast. And it's called Gish Galloping, where you just say like a bunch of nonsense claims real quick. And when the other person is trying to refute them, if they don't get them all, then you won. Right. And so he does that with journalists all the time. And so the trick to it is just really to focus in and to hold him to the original question. And they're finally doing it. It took like 2 years.
Well, considering the guy's been promising he's got the answers to everything, and then he doesn't answer anything. I think that was that scale starting to tip a little bit. It's also a little bit. We used to have like when we started our web development business like 25 years ago. We had a client who was a Scientologist in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, and it was like mixing with all the Celebrity Center and all that kind of stuff. It was really weird. We were getting like emails from John Travolta and Kelly Preston telling us they'd like us to change the font and stuff. It was just bizarre. It was just really, really weird. But, exactly. But one of the weirdest things about it that I learned.
Let's pick up that name you dropped over.
Sorry.
I don't want to be on a mailing list. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah, for the record, I do not endorse anything Stuart says about Scientology.
None of them are listening. It's fine. Don't worry. But what I find fascinating about it at the time, I remember learning about it because I was like, what the hell is this? And I learned more about it and all that kind of stuff. And there's one of the tenets of discourse is to attack, never defend. And I noticed that exact same thing in Trump and that exact same thing in Poilievre, where they'll be held to task for something, they're brought to task for something, and instead of actually defending it, they will attack. They'll never defend. They'll just constantly attack. And it's literally one of the base sort of methods of defense for Scientology when being questioned on is like, don't defend it, attack the person instead. And it's fascinating to me. It's absolutely fascinating. And I see the same thing. And I'm just wondering why no one looks at this type of, tactic and goes, well, this is just garbage. This is
like
just nonsense.
Journalists don't. They need to be invited to the next presser. But like we can pick up the tells, right? Like we see the tells of politicians. And so we can, as you do in your playful playing of Poilievre, that's an alliteration, you can show it. Like you can show just how ridiculous it actually looks by what you do. Steve and I just call it out because it's absurd, a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's that, but I think there's also like focusing on sort of the tricks that they use matters a lot too. Pointing at very specifically the games that they're playing and saying like, yeah, this is what he's doing. Watch, he's doing this right now.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and the more that the media sort of holds his feet to the fire on questions, like in multiple cases this week, the media held his feet to the fire and demanded he answer questions, and the answer he gave was boneheaded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like puberty blockers if you're over 18. Great news for anybody over the age of 18 who wants to stop puberty.
Let me get out that medical journal that he's got, right? Like just,
Yeah.
And that's it. Like as soon as he's forced to actually answer a question, it comes apart. And so I think that's what we need to keep encouraging from journalists.
It was nice.
Man, it was nice to see.
It was, wasn't it? It was really nice to see. Because I know so many journalists, and I think, God, you guys are smart. Like, why there was like this deference that was happening and this sort of like kowtowing, and it's like, why? Why are we doing this to this guy? But I understand exactly as you said that there's also that aspect of they need to be invited to the next presser. They don't want to get in trouble. I did watch one press conference, live press conference on CTV News Channel at some point, and this was like last week sometime, and it was in Brantford, and he's answering questions. And the one reporter is just his voice, and he said whatever his question was at the time. And it was an okay question. It was pretty good and pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And it was like, well, this should be good. And of course, Poilievre just like started attacking rather than answering the question. and saying, you know, what do you mean by this? Blah, 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 blah. And asked a bunch sort of comeback questions. And the guy said, I don't know. My office just told me to ask that question. I was like, why? Why are we sending you there, man? Listen, I don't expect everybody to do this. I don't expect. Yes, exactly. He was from Omni. I was like, I don't expect you to know exactly how to do this. It's like that Apple eating video. It's like, I don't expect you to be able to just take on the potential world leader guy in a conversation right off the bat, but send your A-team. Send your A-team. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I talked to a journalist about that, and like apparently having like somebody cover your press conference is not tremendously uncommon.
Sure.
So I'm willing to cut that journalist a little bit of slack here.
It was many of them had the same question. So like I think the question got answered at some point. I actually felt bad for him because he probably was like, I guess I'll go, right?
Oh, so did I. Yeah, I
Look,
exactly.
Man, I'm just here to get that guy over there to sign my check. I don't really care whether you answer this question or not.
Looks down at his text, sees, ask question before you leave. Okay,
done.
That's what it is.
Look, man, I did my job.
Yeah, I'm not giving the guy a hard time. Good for him doing it, because again, it didn't sound like his job. It's like they'd sent some guy who fixes the vending machine to do it.
Yeah,
and it was like, this is unfair. This is totally unfair of this position to begin. Anyway, I mean, it is good to see, and it's good to see. I think, you know, I was talking to someone else today, and I think that that ship, that Poilievre ship, will sink itself the more and more light is exposed on it.
He seems like someone that the more you get to know him, the more you like him. You know, it just seems like you're warm to him over time. That's why you hear so many stories from close, lifelong friends about him.
Mustafa. Yes. I'm sure Mustafa thinks highly of him.
Does he?
Oh my God, the Mustafa thing, I love that so much.
Yes.
But like, does Poilievre sleep in a pod? Does anybody actually like hang out with him in real life?
I am 100% that is what he sleeps in. Yeah.
Does he? I feel like he sleeps with his arms like this.
Can't be touching. No. You know what I think?
When he wakes up, does he like sit up or does he just go straight to standing?
No knees. No knees.
Don't ruin what we do in the shadows for me. I enjoy that show.
It's one of those things that, you know, if I had magic powers, like I would like to know, does he actually believe the garbage that comes out of his mouth? Or is it just a means to an end for him? Right?
I don't think he does. I don't think he's a dummy at all. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's a smart guy who has risen to this position of power for however he did that, to be honest. Because I'm not exactly sure how it follows after going through. I mean, I looking at Aaron O'Toole, who I wasn't a big fan of, but at the same time, I'm like, we could have done worse than that. You know what I mean? Andrew Scheer, lucky escape. And there's another name I can drop. One of my proudest moments, I was the ambassador of the Canada Day parade in a small township nearby. And I was asked, and I said, I won't do it. I can't do this. Nice. And they said, we're going to give you a sash. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And it was a nice sash.
Of course.
Really nice.
You don't give away a sash.
I've still got it right here. I've got it right here.
I love that it's within easy reach.
What if I need it?
He has to validate the story.
I mean, whenever your sash-related needs come, oh my God.
For those of you listening, it says Right Honorable Brittlestar on it.
That needs
and
to
then
be
on the other side says
magnificent.
I love it.
Which is a bit close to Grand
I want a sash.
And it's got a nice what do they call this thing?
A ribbon?
That thing. This
ribbon?
I'm sorry, we're the common folk without sashes. We don't know what happens.
That's us non-sash folks.
Sash terminology. If any of you out there listening or watching own a sash, if you could tell me what that's called, that'd be great. Anyway, he was there, and there's a whole other story to him being there, and he is just as wonderful as you think. And I turned around, but I didn't know who he was. I had obviously heard his name and stuff, and I turned around and I knew that I didn't like him. But I said, "Hi, I'm Stuart, and you are?" And he went, kind of taken aback. I'm Andrew Scheer. I went, "Oh," and then I turned back and I said to myself, "I'm going to spend all day not being in pictures with you." And we were cutting cake. We were cutting cake together in this tiny little shack, and I was like, "Nope. If this cake's got to be big enough, I'm at the other end of this goddamn cake because I am not going to be smiling and chuckling it up."
I respect that.
Yeah.
Oh man, you see, I haven't been invited to any big to-dos quite like that.
It's all going to change after this episode.
I've been invited to Peacock Days in Souris, Manitoba.
Oh.
And I say this with the fondest reverence because I had a delightful time. I love this thing.
Sure.
But it is literally just like a peacock-themed small-town festival, and I was invited to be one of these celebrity guests for the peacock calling competition.
How'd you do?
I wore an inflatable T-Rex costume. It was 40 degrees. I thought I was gonna die. And I lost.
Yeah, that's horrible.
To the mayor.
It was rigged.
Oh, it's rigged.
They needed an out-of-towner to come in to be the fall guy. That was it. Yeah. You need
exactly.
Right? For the record, go to Souris Peacock Days. I had a blast. But.
You think you're so cool in the big city of Regina? Come on out here where life really happens.
To Souris, Manitoba. They let me fly a plane.
Like from where?
Come on.
Legit. There's a old World War II air base right there.
You just got to pick a plane and fly it?
No, they take you up, and then like we're up, and the guy's like, "Yeah, you can take some footage and stuff," and I take some footage, and then he's like, "You want to fly it?" I was like, "I feel like I shouldn't."
Yeah,
he's like, "No,
exactly.
Just like
you and me.
I
think that's a bad idea. Yeah.
I'm like, "You're sure this is a thing I'm doing right now?"
And then he sat you on his lap,
and
and he's like, "Just go ahead, take it." Grab the joystick.
He's like, "Yeah, you can pitch it this way and that way." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm flying a plane." And I've never, like, I was flying it like this with my shoulders around my
like
ears the entire time.
Sure. Yeah.
But
because you're
cool,
fancy.
See, and people say we should trust the country folk more.
Right,
and I think that's a terrible idea, apparently. At least when it comes to aviation.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to aviation.
Reckless aviation.
Reckless aviation.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my God. We've been chatting for a while. I mean, I'm happy to keep going, but I don't want to keep you guys too long. If you'd like to go into the bargaining conversation, we can
that's
do
a
that.
big one. That's a
No,
big
we
one.
can punt on that till next time for sure. That's a deep well that I feel like we can yammer about endlessly.
Okay. Well, let's finish off on just a little quick thoughts on kind of a continuation of the Trumpism and all that sort of nonsense that's coming through. That sort of it's a weird. I guess I was going to say as well. We all agree that Poilievre is just a libertarian, right? Am I wrong?
Well, so this is what I was going to say is like I think a lot of people compare Poilievre to Trump, and I think it's the wrong comparison. He is a dyed-in-the-wool Ayn Rand Republican. He's Paul Ryan.
Yeah, fair.
Right. Yeah,
right? He comes from it from a government gotta go. And he'll say and do whatever it takes to make that happen.
Except his own bread and butter for decades.
Oh, yeah. You think
if the government gotta go,
Come
then
on.
he gotta go. But I don't think he hasn't done that math yet, I don't think, right?
Then he gotta go too.
Oh, the bad.
No. He only wants the bad bits of government. He's the good bit.
He's the good bit. I did find it fantastic when he started his whole campaign as leader for Pierre for PM, and I was like, that's not even how it works, man. That's not we do. Like we don't.
But
vote
his
for
base
Prime
doesn't
Minister.
know
Like,
that.
that's just not how it works.
That's the problem.
And
I
know.
It baffles me that somehow half the country is enamored with the most obnoxious person in your poli-sci class. Like the guy who has more of a comment than a
zombie model
question.
parliament. Yeah,
like, he is that guy who wore a suit to your university classes, and you're just like, I need you to never talk ever. And everybody's like, that's my guy.
Yeah.
Like, really?
I think, if I was going to defend people for supporting him, I would say that one of the things is, going back to that point about the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, is that for a lot of people, the news has never affected them. Now, with the pandemic, for sure, it affected them. And then now they're suddenly kind of aware of all this other stuff and like, wait, carbon tax, I think I pay for that. Whereas they might not even have been aware of that prior to, the pandemic happening, because why bother? Who cares? You pay what it is. Until you run out of money, it's not a bad thing.
It's pretty small. Like, it's been escalating over time.
Yes.
So it's getting more and more noticeable,
yeah,
too.
Absolutely. But I think that's, like, to me, I always think it's like, everybody's swimming. Everyone's trying to tread water. And it's really hard for, there's people who are treading water and holding up families at the same time. And they're going, yeah, but pay attention to what he's saying about carbon tax. Pay attention to what he's saying about whatever. And they're like, listen, man, I'm swimming. This is if I stop doing this to pay attention to that, one of us is going to drown. And I think there's a lot of that aspect, and it's partially there's some laziness to it for sure, but I think there's also just that idea of that they've never had to before in their lives, and so they think, well, it's fine. I think that's why you get that ping pong of like liberal conservative back and forth. And I think really good examples throughout history as well. In Ontario, when Mike Harris was elected premier, I was somewhat aware it was happening. I was of politics at the time. But I remember vividly thinking to myself, people were really upset when he got into government and started cutting nurses, cutting teaching and all that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, but he said all that stuff. He said he was going to do that stuff. I didn't vote for him because I think it's a terrible idea. But at least the guy did what he said he was going to do, and now you're upset with him. And I think it was that idea of like people just don't even know. They don't even pay attention to what's happening, and they'll just vote for whoever sounds like a change.
But there's a second layer behind that, which is those feelings of frustrations that people have go back to the fact that the bill is coming due for 30 years of underfunding basically everything.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a difficult truth to face, is that like, we're probably going to have to deal with that in an uncomfortable way, right? Like, there's a conversation to be had about how, but it's not going to be free to deal with healthcare, education, modernizing the electric grid. Blah. There's a million billion things that we've known and haven't done anything about. And so when you have people who are saying we need a solution that addresses the difficult problem, versus one group who's saying, we're just going to get angry and not do anything. Yeah. One's easy and satisfying, but it's not an answer, but people are grabbing onto it tight.
The thing is that when he goes on his little tours of Canada and he says what he says, that's all fine and good. He's got the lighting and everything, but they also have to take a look at what's happening, the way that they're voting on things now, because he can go out and say anything he wants to say about housing, about, children, but how are they voting in Parliament? And I don't think that's what Joe Canadian is looking at. They're looking at him with his T-shirt and his pecs and bought and paid for, but they don't see when he's in the suit how he and his party are voting. And I think we're in a situation which really sucks in a country of you can't like Pierre because you don't like Justin. And that's what all this is. They like Pierre because they hate Justin.
Yeah. I guess it's terrible, and I wish there was better choices. I think having known a lot of other conservatives, and also in my life, I voted for conservatives before, I voted for NDP before, I voted for Liberal before, and very much trying to vote for what's going to serve our riding the best, essentially, where I'm voting when it comes to federal elections specifically. And I think that I feel like myself and Shannon, my wife, are one of few of our friends who are even aware of what we were voting for, which is kind of scary. And I can only hope that kind of saying the whole thing about how the first time news that affected people was the pandemic for a lot of people. I'm hoping that kind of opens their eyes now to make them think, well, maybe I should brush up a little bit. Maybe I should.
Well, and I think that's where, even stuff like Lisa and I's content and the videos that you make and even podcasts like this are a part of that. Like, I agree. One of the things that we need to do with news is to make it digestible, right? It can be a lot to take in. And so putting it in manageable bites and welcoming packages is a really important part of that. Because people like policies dry as dust.
It is.
And so how do you make it dance? Well, you have interesting conversations about it. You look at the structural issues behind it. Like, you look at it as a part of a larger context. or you make goofy jokes, or you put your face on a silly filter that makes you
or
dance
you
in a
don't,
Cheeto
or you
leotard.
don't.
Oh yeah, Lisa, do the heart thing again.
Will it work?
Do the heart thing. Will it work? There, look at that.
What a time to be alive.
For those of you listening at home, Lisa just made a
magic.
heart sign with her hands, and then hearts came out of it.
And neither Stuart nor I have access to the
No, we
technology.
can't. I don't think
That's not really a heart. Yeah.
I've made a pear. I've made a
Like,
pear
would a
shape.
Swifty,
I
does a
don't-
Swifty heart
put your
do
hands
it?
down.
That
Put your hands
is the
down.
worst Swifty heart imaginable. Oh, I'm making it work.
All right. Well, let's just wrap this up. I really like the idea, Steve, you had of us doing an improvised theme. So let's do a theme in the way, but we should break it down into pieces. So one of us should do percussion, one should do instruments, and one should do
I don't think
vocals,
that's in
which
my
is
contract,
just
but
the
okay.
name of the show over and over again.
Okay, well, I feel like I'll bring up the bass here.
Oh,
Okay, so you
no,
got
I'll
that.
do drums. Thank you.
Lisa, do you want to be
No one needs to hear
vocals
that.
or drums? All right, well, you start us off. Give us a punk beat. Well, thanks for listening. Hey, listen, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. This is a good intro, I think. And subscribe and do all the things and share and tell all your friends, tell the whole bunch. And just remember, thanks for listening to Podcast is Broken. Here's our theme for this episode. Podcast is broken. Podcast is broken. Podcast is broken.
That was horrible.
That was good, wasn't it?
Yours? I was like,
Mine
where's
got real
Kramer? What's happening?
I felt it was good for us to cut it just in case at that point because I was worried about copyright.
Oh, man.
Apparently
Where do we
like
go
Seinfeld.
next?
I
Where
didn't
do
know
we
what
go
else to
next?
do.
Don't hang up. Don't leave yet. I'm going to stop recording,
away.
but don't leave. Don't leave.
Go away. Go away.
Everyone else listening, if I didn't bother editing this, you guys can leave.